Welcome to Cashman's Garage. Today, we're going to be working on an '04 Volkswagen Beetle 2.0. And today, we're going to be doing the water pump and timing belt, as well as the tensioner and everything involved. Should be a whole lot of fun. Let's get started. So as you can see here, first step is to get this thing kind of in the air, get our passenger side tire off, and this should hopefully give us a little room. You might have some skid plates or something, or plastic blocking our path here. On this one here that I'm working on, it seems to all be missing, or just non-existent. So, good news for us, we got access. So, from here, we're going to start removing some of this stuff on the top, hopefully give us some room. It's looking like we're going to want to take off this motor mount here. And to do that, we're going to want to stabilize this engine. So we're going to take a jack and stick it right here on the corner of this oil pan. And that should hopefully keep this up so that we can get to work. Let's move forward. So we got our motor mount out. It's definitely clearing up some room. Now that I got this out, you can see a little bit better. You got two 18mm bolts. Down here, you got two 16mm bolts. And then you got one little 13mm guy, and this should slip right out. So we're going to put this back here with everything lined up so we don't lose it. And from here, we're getting pretty close. Did remove our little coolant hose that comes from back here and loops around. I figured that would give us a little more room. So it's almost to the point where we can see a little bit better here. I think our next step is going to be taking off the rest of this motor mount here to give us a little more access. Looks like we got some bolts down in the bottom. Could be damn near impossible to see here. So I will catch you once this thing is off. So this part of the mount is a whole bunch of fun. So I found if you lift the engine using that jack that we put underneath the oil pan, you can get to this bolt pretty easily. It's a 16mm. Then you can lower the engine, and that'll get you to the bottom bolt, which you can't see here not very well, but there it is. And then they put a really pesky one right in the middle here. So once you get that one off, which is a little bit more tricky, I had to lift the engine once again, and unfortunately it's going to be a little tough to do with one hand, but this in theory should slip out. I may have to jog the motor around a little bit, but all three bolts are 16mm. Once you have that out of the way, we're going to start working on the belt. We're going to take the belt off, and then we're going to get this tensioner off as well. Let's keep on rolling. Well, this is just turning into a whole bunch of fun. So I've wiggled this thing up and down and around, not having a whole lot of luck. So I decided that if we took this plastic cover here, which is really, really easy, I disconnected our hose from up here. Just push that to the side. That gave me enough room to get to my two little snap connectors here, which gave me enough room to wiggle this out. Now, with that timing cover out of the way, we can actually see our cam gear there. And we got a lot more room to wiggle this thing out. So we're just going to keep on rocking here. So as you see here, wiggled out just nicely. I found with that timing cover removed, there was just enough space to kind of push it back in this little crevice and then pull it down from the bottom here. Probably 100 different ways to do it. That worked out for me. Now we're going to get this tensioner. We got a 6mm hex right here, and we got three 13mm bolts. As you can see, I got two of them off already. I am going to take my little adjustable wrench here and take the tension off the belt. And I'm going to take this last little bolt off, and that should clear up a little more room. I have a feeling we're going to be removing this alternator too, but let's see how it goes. Upon further inspection, it doesn't look like we're going to need to remove the alternator, but we are going to have to remove all four of these crank pulley bolts. They're 6mm hex. Probably work easier with an impact gun. Otherwise, you're going to have to somehow keep tension on this crankshaft pulley so that this just doesn't spin out on you. Then we're going to work on the timing cover itself. As you can see here, we got some little bolts that they're all over the place. So I'm going to get this pulley off and we'll go from there. So as you can see, we got our crank pulley off. Not a whole lot to it. You don't have to remove that center bolt. All you got to do is shimmy this thing back and forth. Comes right out. And then you got 3 more 10mm bolts. And those are going to hold the little bottom of this timing cover on. So at that point, we're going to have crank gear exposed and 3 more, what do we got here? 2 more bolts holding this cover on. So we're going to take these little 10mm guys off, and we should be fully exposed and ready to go. Well, so far, so good. We got motor mount attached to the engine, top timing cover, tensioner with that bracket, crank pulley, lower timing cover, and then whatever the hell cover you want to call that. So we're moving right along here. I'm leaving everything in order because it's all going to go back basically in the same order but backwards. Now we're going to be looking here, and we're going to want to line up our timing marks. So as you can see right on the top here, we have a little OT with an arrow right there. And there's a dimple, a little divot, and it's hard to see here. Let's see. It is right here. Hard to really make it stick out, but you can see there's a little mark there. So we're about 180 off. So I am going to take a 19mm triple square or 12-point socket, whatever you want to call it, one of these babies, and an extension. We're going to stick it out our crank pulley. We're going to want to move this clockwise until that timing mark lines up. Should take all but a minute. This would be a lot easier if there's spark plugs out. I'm not taking them out, so we're going to have a little back pressure here. But we're going to do that, and then we're going to start working on getting this belt off. So as you can see here, I managed to turn the engine over. We got our marks nice and lined up. As you can see, they're yellow now. I hit them with a little paint. Just offset of that 11. Looks perfect. Then we come down here, and there's like a little blue dot, which is really hard to see. So I marked that, and then put a couple marks of my own. And this is going to make it a lot easier to line up when all is said and done, and this way we know all our teeth are in the right place, and we're not going to start smacking valves on pistons, which is the last thing you want to do. I will not be responsible for anybody trashing their engine. So, let's move forward. I think we're going to take off that tensioner and slip this belt off, and then we're going to pull off that water pump. Making progress, guys. So kind of take note of what that tensioner looks like when you take it off. There's a little slot on the back of the new one, as you can see here. And this is going to line up with our freeze plug. And then when you get to tightening this thing up, this little arrow and this little arrow are going to squeeze together and line up. Now, our water pump, it's about as straightforward as it gets. 3 10mm bolts, but it doesn't look like it's going to want to get out of the way because we have this little metal plate here. So I'm going to take off, it looks like just 1 bolt right here. Hold this plate on after you get the water pump bolts out. So I'm going to take that 1 bolt out. I'm going to shimmy this water pump out, and hopefully I don't make a giant mess. Have a catch pan ready if you didn't drain the coolant. So sometimes you have a little spillage. No big deal, but man, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I can't believe what happened when I pulled out that water pump. So, here she is. Twist her around a little bit, slide her out. I think we're missing something. I had to reach into the engine and grab our pulley. Or actually the fins would actually push the water around. Now apparently this is a pretty common problem with these Volkswagens, especially the ones with the black pulley here. So Our new one is metal, so we shouldn't have this issue, but this is the main reason why we're doing the timing belt. Not because the timing belt was bad, but because this thing was overheating like crazy, and I think we found why. Now, if you're doing one of these at home, make sure you have all the pieces before you put the new water pump in, because you don't want those new old pieces getting caught up in the new pump. So I'm gonna kind of put pieces all together to make sure I have everything, and then I'm gonna put the new pump in, and we'll go from there. Look at that shiny new water pump. Pretty straightforward. I like to use a little assembly lube on the O-ring. It makes it a little easier to slip this thing in. Get the bottom 2 bolts, and then wait on your top one because you're going to need to get your plate in. Just pop the plate in, get that top bolt off, and then we're going to get on to putting the timing belt back on. Alright guys, moving right along here. So, what I decided, I actually took our little marks on the belt, counted all the freaking teeth in between them, and put marks on the new belt. So I had 69. This guy on the top here by your cam was the 69th coming from this mark, and then the 65th coming from the other mark. Now, depending on where you put your marks on the crankshaft, you could come up with different numbers than I did, but this is going to make sure that everything goes back in the exact same way that it came out, which is really important. So as you can see here, our timing marks still line up. Now I noticed when I was doing this, I needed to put the tensioner on kind of with the belt at the same time. Pretty straightforward. So I got pretty much everything sort of in there. Lined this up, popped it on. The first time I did it, I was off by a tooth. But as you can see here, everything is lining up perfect. Now, this crank could move a little bit on you, so just make sure that nothing moves. When everything is all done, everything should line up exactly the way it did before. And right now, it is looking like that's the case. So at this point, we're going to be putting some tension on our tensioner here, and should be ready to seal this thing back up. All right, guys, we're making progress. So that tensioner is pretty interesting. So you got those 2 little holes in the side of it. You got to use those to kind of line up your marks. Now, if you remember what I showed you earlier on that tensioner, actually I can show you on the old one here. You want your arrow to meet up with this guy. Now, to do this by yourself, like I am doing, I found one of these little scopes to be pretty handy, because as you can see here, we are perfectly lined up. Now the tools I used a wrench. You don't really need to have a swivel head on it. I just grabbed the closest one I had. It's a 13mm nut. And then I used some bent needle nose pliers to kind of grab our little holes. And I tried to do it just by feel on the first shot. I was way off. So I put this guy on so I didn't have to do this 100 times, and move the tensioner until it lined up absolutely spot on perfect, and then tightened up the nut. So we are looking good. One thing you want to do before putting everything back together, again, always keep checking your timing marks. Make sure everything's on the money, you didn't skip a tooth. Then what you're going to want to do is turn that bottom crankshaft over 2 full rotations. That should bring our timing marks right back to where they should be. Shouldn't have a whole lot of slack in this one. On this side of the belt, you should have a little bit of slack, but not a whole lot. But again, that's what our tensioner is there for. So I'm going to spin this motor around, make sure that we're all buttoned up, and just start throwing this back together. Alright, so all that's really left is to put this thing back together. Should be pretty straightforward. Just do everything in the reverse order that we pulled everything apart. Make sure to top off the coolant and make sure to burp the system. Don't want any air pockets, otherwise it'll continue to overheat. With all that said and done, we're signing off. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit like and subscribe, and make sure you drain the coolant first. Catch you on the next one.